Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who on occasion likes to curl up in a small ball and insists we call him Super Bomb.
Tim Longo.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Good. That's Super Bomb to you.
I'm not going to call you Super Bomb.
Oh, come on. Yeah,
I'm going to call you Pillbug instead.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
That'd be good. I'd like to play a game where you're a Pillbug. I don't know why. I think they're fascinating.
That's because you're a Pillbug.
I think it'd be fun. Well, once you get, what is that one? Spring Ball. Once you get the Spring Ball thing,
you are pretty good. You're pretty good as a barf ball Samus person. As a person who has been touched by the Chozo. I was going to save this till later, but it makes sense to talk about it now, right here at the beginning. We've talked a lot about Samus being the center of the universe and all this stuff. Turns out that Samus's backstory, and this is from Daniel Johansson, who emailed us. Her backstory is that she was orphaned at a very young age and was taken in by a race of space birds called the Chozo. And the wrecked ship area in Super Metroid is a Chozo spacecraft. So it turned the planet Zebes into kind of a Chozo outpost. So the people who raised her, trained her, armed her, and clothed her, I guess, are the same race that inhabited this planet. All the statues that give you the weapons and all those things are Chozo statues, and the items are their relics. Daniel had followed up with me as well and said there was a comic that told her whole backstory, published in Nintendo Power, issues 57 to 61, which I didn't think to go back and dig into, from September 1994. So, thank you, Daniel Johansson, for emailing that in. I appreciate knowing that there is a backstory. I still think it would be fun to have a game which tells her backstory.
So it's a Jungle Book kind of situation.
It sort of is, yeah.
About bounty hunters.
Yeah, she was raised by bird wolves in space. Bird apes.
Oh,
bird apes, really. Bird apes, I guess, is the right thing. I don't think there was ever a me, Samus, you, Jane, but who knows?
All right. That obviously always goes too far, but yeah, interesting. Okay, well, there's some light wrapper there, and as we'll get to later on, sort of the light narrative wrapper that is brought in at the end there with the Metroid itself and all that stuff. We'll talk about later.
I mean, we start tying back to it right away because our last, sort of our last boss before the big boss is Ridley.
Oh, yeah. And you're saying once you defeat him, you find out that the Metroid's gone.
Yes, right, because
you find the empty broken,
on the broken vial, or whatever.
Your princess is in another castle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they're still borrowing from other Nintendo titles. I don't know. Those Metroids do not look like princesses to me, but to each their own. I'm not going to tell Jen. So yeah, these last two bosses, not a fan. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, Brett and I are talking
right out there, and
well, it's like it's. We were talking before, in pre-show before we started the episode, and this game, so many good things to say about this game up to this point, and I wanted to hear your side of it to see if you had similar experience or not, because you've probably power leveled up more than I have. I didn't really, at one point, lost my nerve to kind of look in every single nook and cranny. I was doing okay, but judging by how many energy pips you have, you're ahead of me. I didn't find.
I have the full bottom row, and 2 or 3 of the top row, and then a couple of reserves, which basically mean you can go to 0 and you get a couple back.
Yeah, I didn't find the wave beam. I don't think I ever found that. didn't seek it out, and I might have missed one other thing. So I had some empty slots. But by this point, it was clear to me that I was underpowered, basically. And I was super frustrated by that, because it goes back to your point you had made, your great point that you had made before, not to give you too much credit, because I try to avoid that when I can. It's punishing the wrong people at this point. You're punishing the wrong type of player. Exactly. And if you're not being thorough and going in all the nooks and crannies, which in and of themselves are pretty difficult to find and get to, especially because there's so much backtracking, you're basically punishing yourself. And I get to this point myself, and already not being great at the platforming side of the game, and really, I say platforming, but just kind of controlling her, right, and doing precision-based actions.
The player skill aspects of the game become critical to getting the really difficult to find energy packs and missile power-ups or whatever.
Well, even like fighting the bosses, it's like if you're really good with all of the skill-based stuff, they're probably easier to fight, because you're dodging better, and you're, maybe people are even doing wall jumps in the middle of boss battles. I don't know. That's definitely not me. So yeah, and so I get to this point, and I'm personally clearly underleveled and just completely frustrated by both of the last, boss battles. And
coming back from Ridley, I mean, I felt underpowered with Ridley, and I had probably 120 or 125 missiles and lots of super missiles and lots of super bombs, and I felt like, I've got a lot of stuff, and I may have picked up, 2 or 3 power-ups after that. But the problem was, once I had gone in to the area where you fight Ridley, getting back out is brutal. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely brutal, because you have to go through all at a certain point, I was like, wow, this might be too tough for me. Even though I feel like I've got a lot of stuff. Like, I felt like, man, I've got... I can see, I need 6 or whatever things on the top row. Maybe there's 150 missiles. Maybe there's more. I don't know. I haven't looked it up, but I felt like I had a lot. But I couldn't go back at that point, because getting back was more than I could do with the things that I had, mostly because of the huge power drain of going through. There's a huge lava room. And just getting through that and getting out with the spin jump, the space jump, and, I'm not particularly good at that. I had a lot of difficulty with the very end of the game for the same reason. It was funny because on the very first episode, we talked about how I was like, I didn't test the blood locking in this one big long tunnel because I didn't want to have to do it again. Well, thank you very much. I had to do it again and again and again. But, this game really, and this is not new to me. I felt this way about Metroid Prime 2, which is a game that I got to the next to the last boss on, where you can't go back. And it tells you can't go back. That was one nice thing about the Metroid Prime games. They actually said to you, hey, beyond this point, can't come back.
Oh, I don't remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's basically a menu, a pop-up menu that says, oh, hey, by the way, if you enter this elevator, can't go back.
Huh. Yeah.
And the first time in Metroid Prime I encountered that, I was like, yeah, whatever. And I just went, and I was totally wiped out. And in Metroid Prime 2, I think I just thought I had more than I did. This is not a new experience for me for these games. But it's just as frustrating. And it's the one thing that I wish they would let go of.
Yeah, well, there's that. And I think the other element of this that we talked about in pre-show was the difficulty curve being off, and I feel like I don't want to blame the era, overly on this point, but really I feel like this was an era rife with that kind of concept of, and we even dealt with a little bit of Final Fantasy IX to be honest, but just ramping up that end just to kind of like the cynical version is just to squeak a little bit more of that time out of you, or to really you really want it,
Right. But it's also a developer thing, right? you and I have made, like, I mean, the Starfighter games are like the example from our shared history.
Yeah.
Those are games where
I'm
in the
just
middle
as guilty.
there are huge spikes in difficulty, and we don't see them.
And the end, yeah.
In the end. Well, not Jedi Starfighter, but maybe Starfighter.
Not Jedi, no, I'm talking about Starfighter specifically.
Yeah, and Starfighter specifically, yeah, the end is very difficult, requires really good flying skills in particular. Not so much shooting skills. You have like these guided missiles and stuff, but the flying skills are really, really tough in that
in the ship,
the droid control ship.
Yeah.
And that's very, very difficult. And there's numerous rooms that have different levels of flying challenge, right? I mean, it's a developer thing. Like, you're so good at these games by the time you get to the end.
You're good at it. Yeah, you're good at it. The other, I think. I mean, to be honest, still debate it to this day. You know, anything I'm working on, you know, at any time, there's really that, I think, debate and potential fallacy that there's this necessity to ramp up difficulty at the end of games, right? So there's this, so you really feel like you've finished, you know, and earned it, and that people want that, and I don't know if it's true. You know,
Right.
I think that it is for some people, and
well, and I think other games from Nintendo do a better job of modulating.
Yeah, that's the thing that bummed me out.
Like,
is that
Zelda is pretty good at doing this. I mean, there's bosses and they have tricks and you have to learn the tricks, but they're not like I had to build up these million different things or things you have to have. They're part of the story. You can't miss them, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have the shield, the metal shield or whatever, that reflects fireballs in Ocarina of Time. You have to have it because you got it, right? Mario's another example where you can finish that game with well less than the maximum number of stars. You know, well fewer.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to get, 150 stars to finish that game.
It's hard.
So it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me. Like, I'm of two minds, as I often am. It's hard for me to be too upset because one of the reasons and one of the pillars that we'll probably talk about in the second segment later, just about world structure and about optional, essentially optional content, optional order. The sense of exploration. Like, I value those things so highly in this game design. And because of those, it's going to create these situations where you're going to inadvertently hit a spike that, was maybe not fully intended to be there, or it would be hard for them to really account for all the different permutations, of what people will have.
Well, yeah.
And so, like, I don't want to throw that away.
And you have 50 missiles to 150 missiles.
Yeah, it's just such a wide spectrum. And so, whether it be dynamic difficulty being a solution, or there's various things that I think modern development has started to crack into that help some of that stuff. But so, again, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I guess I just was, it sounds like you were too, just disappointed in that ramp at the end. And it wasn't even just the bosses. Like, it was just getting through some hallways.
Right.
and
or certain space pirates. There was those
those ninja space pirate things.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
I was stumped for a while. Like, I was like, heck. So I did finally get a good routine on those. And I was worried that because I missed the wave beam that maybe I did have the plasma beam, which was good, but I didn't get the wave beam. So
I think what the wave beam allows is for you to shoot through walls. So I don't think that.
Yeah.
I made a note last week where I was like, wave beam, meh? Like,
yeah,
is
you
that
mentioned
necessary?
that. Yeah.
And I don't, but I do think that it actually, all it adds, I don't actually think it would have helped with some of these bosses for sure. Like, I think you have everything you need.
Not with the bosses, yeah.
Right. With the bosses, but even getting to them, like getting through those gold ninjas or even just the tougher space pirates where you need the space jump basically to kill them. I don't think the wave beam helps with any of that because the beams don't hurt them. It's not. I mean, I'm with you. Like, I don't want to lose the exploration, but at the same point, I think the positive feedback loop of getting stuff and making yourself more powerful is just too strong. And it really leaves behind other players. And I know, like, the response is, well, you have an opportunity, maybe not right before Ridley, but I mean, I did go back and wander around and try to find stuff. I found, I remember last time I mentioned a room that I couldn't find. I'm pretty sure I had actually already gotten whatever power-up was in there because I had the X-ray and I went back there. I finally found it. I was like, oh, there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. I must have actually already gotten the thing.
Yeah, part of the map design problem.
Yeah, part of the map problem, which I think was just maybe to a certain degree limitations. It's hard to say. Honestly, that one's hard to say. I actually think that probably was possible to do, and they didn't think of it. Or it wasn't a focus. They had enough to figure out to maximize the system. Like, I figure like they could have just drawn a sprite which was 1 pixel saying it's in this room and it's not in this room anymore. And it feels like that part was not. That's something we do much better.
Yeah.
We do. I've been playing an Assassin's Creed game recently, Assassin's Creed 3. There are a million collectibles in an Assassin's Creed game. I was playing Shadows of Mordor, same thing. Yeah, they're really good at telling you, hey, in this area, and I don't even need it to be this room. Just like, if they told me in Criteria, or in Brinstar or whatever, there are 6 missile things left, I would have been like, okay, now I know. There's 6 missile things left. And I would have loved knowing that. Back then, that wasn't such a thing. So,
yeah, and I didn't get time to, but I definitely wanted to refresh my memory on Fusion to see what kind of modern conventions they added in to basically the same structured game, 2D, etc. Yeah. And I'm betting that some of that stuff is in there. Yeah, so we've cracked those nuts.
Certainly, I remember them coloring the doors at least, so you could know I couldn't get there. That's my recollection. It also controls a little bit better because that's another thing we talked about, in the pre-show. That both of us just had trouble with wall jumping in particular, space jumping to a degree, probably less of a degree, but it took me a long time to sort of get the timing on the space jumps, and I just gave up on the wall jump. I
avoided it at all costs.
If I didn't have to do it, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I did go back to where you learn it because you can short hop the hole you fall through and get an energy power up or reserve. I don't remember which. So I did go back there. But of course, going back there, I fell down the damn hole again and had to jump back out, and that took just forever.
The space jump definitely helps.
It's a lot easier.
Called the space.
I think it's called the space jump. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's
space jump or the spin jump.
Spin jump. There's the screw attack that you kind of add into that. Yeah.
I think it's the space jump. Is the
That's where you can
spin
hit jump on the apex of it. Or right after. Yeah, I definitely never got quite good at that, but that was fun. Like in a horizontal hallway full of enemies that over lava, there's a couple of those where they kind of want you to go through in a very tight space, where it's best if you kind of just tap that, at a rhythm, and you never touch anything and you're just killing everything along the way. Those are pretty gratifying.
Yeah. It's hard gratifying if you find the rhythm for sure. And there were places where I was like, oh, now I can get to that place because I can do this thing where I just kind of jump endlessly. And I thought that was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't, I love that.
Going back to the sense of empowerment, that we talked about last episode, I think that, that was a good example, like the sprint, power sprint thing, feeling like you're just a badass. That was definitely fun. It's just the execution was tricky, and all
right. So setting aside the difficulty of Ridley and Mother Brain, I do like. I'd go so far to say I love the storytelling that happens there.
Yeah.
There's
completely unexpected.
It was very unexpected, and it ties in. You sort of have to know a little bit about the original Metroid 2 story, I guess, where she rescues this this baby Metroid, I guess, and then that's what Ridley gets and takes away. That's the only Metroid on that station that all the people died on.
Yeah, I think they're doing experiments on it or something, right? Or we were or something.
Yeah, right? It's not clear. or they may have said, that they were trying.
I think
it had
intro.
huge amounts of power or something like that. Yeah, there was something there. But then Ridley takes it. That's the Pteranodon type thing, the horrible boss, and then it escapes. And we've started to see more of them at that point. So you're like, oh man, these things are really, really dangerous and deadly. But you have this moment at the end where you see this really enormous Metroid, maybe, I don't know, fully grown or whatever. But it reminded me of, that. Have you seen that lion video? You know the one I'm talking about.
A lion? What, on YouTube?
On YouTube, yep.
A real lion?
A real lion.
No, I don't think I know what you're talking about.
You haven't seen... What's that song? I Will Always Love You from The Bodyguard?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. You have to look that up.
Okay.
The lion... I'm telling everybody now. The lion, the bodyguard... But it's this video where these two guys had a lion as a pet, and they had it repatriated to Africa, I believe, to the savannah. And they go to Africa. And it's like these guys who had this lion that they grew from a cub until it got too big in their apartment. They go to Africa, and they're out there, they're on the frickin' veldt. And the lion runs up and bounds up and then hugs one of the guys.
What?
It is the most amazing thing. It is basically the end here of Super Metroid. You have to see this. Wait,
so this is a legit, real thing.
This is a real thing with real. This is not like Siegfried and Roy. This is
the lion is
two
fully
normal
grown.
human beings who aren't dressed in any kind of sequins, who raised a lion. It's amazing. It's genuinely amazing. And of course, it's set to this music in the video that's online, which is the Whitney Houston song. And it's perfect. It's edited perfect. You have to see it.
Yeah,
it's the thing you have to see. But that's kind of the moment that you have, in the story with the Mother Brain, where if you manage to get to the end of this, basically the end of this battle. I love the whole arc there. It's like, this thing comes and it basically captures and powers you back up to be able to take out Mother Brain, sacrificing itself for basically what it thinks is its mother. Like it's sort of bound to you, maybe.
And it charges you up before that, right? Or doesn't it? There's a moment where it gives you its health, basically.
Right.
And they establish, by the way, maybe you mentioned, I missed it, but they establish in the room where you first meet it that it has this power where it can essentially suck life out of things.
Suck energy out of things. And that's what makes Metroid so dangerous.
Yeah. And it was just kind of, that room where you think you're going to fight it and then it kind of, the reversal happens. I thought it was, it's just interesting that they put the resources into making that kind of special mechanic where it's going to suck the life out of something, right? Because it had various different entities you've seen throughout the game in that room that have been either sucked, dry, or they show it actually. I feel like I remember that, or it kind of,
No, you're right.
To present the mechanic, and then to have that kind of reversed, later on. And the only thing which, I'm definitely nitpicking to look for things to criticize, because like you said, a genuinely interestingly weird, touching moment in a way. I wish that they would have threaded that throughout the game more. You know what I mean? Because I feel like, as far as ratio of time spent with this concept and with the Metroid was just so minimal compared to the hours of the game you're playing. I feel like these days we can do a better job at kind of threading in that theme. So it's not, because it was a bit of a out of left field, albeit very cool. It just kind of thrown in at the end. Do you know what I mean?
Right. No, I agree. It's basically at the beginning and it's in the end, and it basically relies on the previous game, which neither of us played. Right?
Yeah. I played a long time ago, but I don't remember anything.
Not for this. Yeah. So it's just kind of okay, right? I mean, it just kind of came out of nowhere for us.
Still effective, even despite all that stuff.
It is. It is still effective, and you do still have this sense of like it's this, that you have some kind of relationship with this thing, and that it's choosing you over the mother brain monster, and when you get walloped in that final battle, it comes in and basically gives itself for you, and then. I will say another thing I kind of liked at that point was that you have to recover. I mean, there's a few steps there that are new to you, but there's basically getting out to where you basically started on this, on this planet. And when you originally ran to the left because you couldn't go to the right, you originally ran to the left and went down and started making your way into the. Into Zebes, you basically have to reverse that to get out and get to your ship, which I really, really like. I found that really powerful.
Yeah.
They could have popped you out somewhere else. They could have popped you out, right below it. They could have made you do whatever the super jump thing is, where you're like power run and then jump up. That very powerful thing we talked about last time. But instead, they make you actually traverse. Yeah. The same sorts of spaces literally the same spaces that you started.
And the context is completely different because you have all of your powers and stuff, right? So it's like and they put the timer on there, so kind of there's an echo mirror of the opening tutorial right before you get to the planet. So there's kind of beginning and end, even though those time-based, timer moments are always frustrating for me because I just
died a few times doing that.
Yeah, more than a few for me, and I just get overly anxious and make too many mistakes.
Yep.
But it was a nice presentation of that exit because you definitely feel full circle, right? That I just again come back to the theme of you've come to understand and know this world pretty darn well, right? For the most part, because you've just tread every inch of it, or a lot of it. But the other side of it with the difficulty ramp up that I just and it's always hard for the podcast because we're generally playing a bit on a deadline, right? So. It's more frustrating for me because if I were playing it, just on my own, I'd take time with it and come back to it when I was calmed down. But just it felt like there was a lot of additional added, basically from Ridley to Mother Brain and then up to the ship. It felt like there was a lot of added, I will say, irritants or things that were kind of put in there just to mess with you.
Yeah.
Whether it be like
new types of space pirates, especially.
Yeah, and just kind of like overly difficult just for the sake of just messing with you.
I mean, getting the Mother Brain alone, there's these sort of floating circles.
Infinite, right? I couldn't find a way to stop them.
And then there's the lasers.
Little lasers that
or whatever.
Interrupt your jumps, and they kind of just, they just
make you lose health. They make you, it's just like, it's already going to be tough enough. You need to be hitting. That would be a perfect degree of difficulty thing to dial back.
Yeah.
Just, spawn less of this, do less of this for every, energy power up or whatever that they have.
Yeah, you mean dynamic difficulty wise? Like just track how many pips you have and then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or make them do less damage. Either way. Equivalent.
It's mainly the interruptions.
That was one of the things that we taught. Yeah, the interruptions are bad because it interrupts how you move.
Yeah.
So maybe just having them fire less frequently or make them more dodgeable. Those would be really easy ways to kind of dial down the knob. One of the things we've always done, at least for our first few games together, was that we made difficulty very obvious. It was certainly in Jedi Starfighter. Special case for reasons I won't go into, but in Starfighter it was the enemies do more or less damage. I believe that was it.
Yeah.
Difficulty.
Yeah, it was. I think we did the same thing on Republic Commando.
And we did that for Republic Commando as well.
Now I believe didn't we steal that from Deus Ex 1?
We stole it from Spectre. I'm not sure which game it was. I think it was Deus Ex.
Yeah,
I think I had read about Deus Ex that was the only.
I think that was actually you. Yeah, you brought that up. It was just a simple thing. Because in those, I mean, I kind of vaguely remember the debate that we had about it because there definitely was an inconsistency, and there still is, of course, across the industry about what knobs to tune for difficulty. And what the nuances were, and case in point, not to go into too deeply, but Halo being a good example of something I'm working on now, where it's actually pretty. There's a lot of different things that are at play there for the different difficulty levels, which have become, kind of canon in the way that the design is for Halo, but and to be expected. But for new games, you got to be careful with overcomplicating how you adjudicate that stuff.
Right. I mean, for a skill game, I mean, this game has no difficulty settings, but for a skill game, like System Shock 2 is a great example that has multiple knobs for difficulty. They have puzzle difficulty.
That's a good point.
And have shooting difficulty. I feel like there's a third one. I think there's 3 levels of difficulty in that game. There may be like power-ups. Like there might be more or less power-ups. And you can control that through a config file only. Unfortunately, there's no menu support. But I recall that, and of course, there's character class choice, but that's in the game. So aside from character class choice, there are, I believe, 2 or 3 knobs that you can turn explicitly and go and make that game less difficult, or less difficult in the ways that you don't care about. Like I don't care if I shoot and do a ton of damage. That's fine by me because combat's not interesting or whatever. And that I think that's if you're going to give players multiple knobs, I think that's a good way to go. This game has none of those. It's just purely what have you gone and done. The knobs are how much time are you willing to put in? Recovering the environment. Yeah, and that is, I think it's fair to say that's typically the Nintendo way, right? They don't have difficulty levels. They're and I will give them due credit that's something I've always appreciated about them, that they set the bar high for themselves, that the tuning and balancing of the game is going to be such that they won't and don't and I think they would say shouldn't have difficulty levels, right? That it's like the game is the game. I believe Miyamoto has come out and said that multiple times. Right.
And you applaud them for that, but there's these times like this, and you had mentioned in pre-show as well that Mario-wise, there's a scalability to whatever numbers of stars or whatever the thing is that unlocks each section. You don't have to get them all.
Yep. You can complete the game, and get the ending, and there might be benefits to doing something more complicated or getting them all or whatever. You might have some... but
the difficulty is locked within the additive optional content in a way, right? Exactly. It's like if you want the difficulty, you can just
choose. Like if you find things that are too difficult for you, you can just do something else. In a Mario game, you can go and find a different star that's easier for you to know how to do.
But the sense of dread that I had at the end of this game, where it's like I have no options. Well, my only option was I could go back and try to scour everything and find more energy pips, etc. But it wasn't going to happen. It's just like I'm going to have to beat my head against the wall on this thing.
Yeah. And we don't, and you don't know how much you're going to have to beat your head against the wall. I beat my head way against the wall with Ridley, but I was stuck. At that point, I was like, oh, I'm here and I can't go back because I tried to go back. So I used everything I had. I was using the super bombs and the super missiles. Super missiles are great if you can land attacks with them, and then regular missiles. I just spent way much time figuring out that I could use the super bombs. It was very helpful, but tough boss. Yeah. Okay, I want to move on briefly to the districts. It's something we talked about last time. It's something we want to talk about.
Yeah.
My 2 favorites, I think, are probably Maridia after you break the glass. And the wrecked ship.
Yeah, wrecked ship for me.
Yeah, I love the wrecked ship, and that's kind of alien. What I like, I think if I had to tie those 2 things together is what I like about them. There are some really annoying things in Maridia, in particular, for navigation. But I love that the monster design is very different. Like, Maridia feels prehistoric in a way. you like have these. I mean, they're not single-celled organisms, but they're organisms without a complex bone structure, right? You have these things that like jump up and kind of float back down, and you have these sort of very thin, kind of wafer-thin things that kind of like, jump towards you and wavy-wise. Yeah. They're very different. They feel different. It feels like an earlier era of this planet, and I really love that. It feels like Journey to the Center of the Earth or something like that. Like we've gone so deep, we've found something very, very different. And then the wreck ship is the same way. You know, you've got those floaty, you know, spheres with the spheres attached, you know, that attack you, and the ghost skulls. I'm not a huge fan of the boss there, but I do really like the feel of that area. You got those robots too that interact differently. You know?
I really like the state change in the wreck ship. You know, that it was such a big state change of the world. You know, I feel like that was the biggest one that you feel in any of the other levels. I think the only other state changes that happen really are based on what abilities you get and what it allows you to do in the same spaces. But so it's kind of more of a subtle difference. But yeah, I don't know. I think that theme was really speaking to me, and the ghost kind of feel of it. It was kind of the most cohesive. It's also like the smallest. You didn't get to live with it as long. But yeah, Maridia, I think of the sort of quote unquote natural areas, Maridia is probably my favorite. The moment of breaking the glass alone and just the theme of being underwater and what all that comes with that, whether it be, you know, the buoyancy and and the physics of it and the buoyancy of it and everything, and then getting the gravity suit. That once you get the gravity suit and you go back to those spaces and feeling free, that was a big binary change as well. That felt really empowering. So,
it's a big deal. I mean, I think that there's a number of monsters that are different in Maridia. There's also the sort of shell covered. I don't know, I think of them as like turtles, but they burrow down into the quicksand and then they jump out. There's just so much that's different there. It's funny because I think that
I didn't like the sand. That's not a good.
No, I didn't care for the sand either. Like, I mean, that's why I separate the navigational challenges. There is like stuff to be found in the sand, and if you go down through the sand, there's sometimes power-ups there.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's weird. It's like a new type of secret. It's like, oh, I didn't know I could go down through there. And there's like fish. You know, it just feels like you're cast back to a different era on this planet, a totally different ecosystem, you know, from the other ones. I absolutely hated the areas where, you know, the water was pouring down and you had to like stay on top of the sand long enough to be able to do a jump, but you had to get enough momentum. I mean, it's just like
I don't think I ever quite understood the physics of the sand, the quicksand, you know, aspects. Like it felt like there were times when I hit
it felt like a wall jump, but horizontal rather than vertical.
Right. With seemingly no feedback. Like like sometimes I would jump
totally agree. No
really
animation
high out of a quicksand and not know why I did it. You know, so it's just spammy.
And I think it's basically the same sort of thing where if you're on top and you're moving in a direction and you switch directions and jump, you pop.
Yeah,
and you get a big jump out of it. You know, that's what I could figure out.
But if you're not good at that, it's not.
And controllers wear out. I mean, they're just not well suited to it. I mean, they really aren't. I mean, even having a decent Nintendo provided Wii adapter controller was not great for playing this game. And I don't put that. I mean, I had a GameCube controller that I loved to play Metroid Prime with, and I loved playing with the Wavebird as well. I mean, I think mostly the controls have been pretty good on these sorts of games, even on the Game Boy Advance or, Game Boy Advance versions, you know, with Metroid Fusion. I feel like these games were badly tuned for controls, just not enough time. I don't know. Maybe all their playtesters were 10 years old. I don't know.
Yeah,
you know, there are themes to the other locations you go.
Norfair.
I couldn't discern a clear a clear thing with Torian, but Norfair is basically the lava. You know?
Yeah, not my favorite. That's probably my least favorite area. That just...
I only liked the sort of empowerment of getting the suit the same as I did getting the suit to go in the water, getting the suit to be able to go in the lava area, and realizing like, oh man, I can't go here. I'm losing health really, really rapidly. Just being in this room, was kind of like, oh man, what am I going to do about that? Because I can't move fast enough.
And then combining that with that suit with the gravity suit later, where there's some lava then, right, that you can then go into, and
pop out.
Yeah. And then I hated the inconsistency later where there's, I don't know if it was just in Torian or other places, but there was another kind of lava that could damage you once you got the suit. So I was like, come on, that's not...
Yeah, when you get to Torian, it's like, oh, this lava that you're jumping around with the laser beams and the circles that are flying around. Yep, sorry, that does damage to you too. Yeah, not my favorite. Anyway, we're it seems like we're both bullish on Maridia and the wrecked ship because of numerous things, actually.
Yeah, it's cohesive.
I did feel just going into Maridia, especially with the water jumping, the buoyancy, I felt like I was in a new place entirely, which was really important. It felt really fresh at the time, so that was pretty great. Well, in order to stay fresh, I say we take a quick break, and then come back with some of our pillars, and then look towards the future. You ready?
Sounds good.
All right, let's take a break. Hello and welcome back from the break. It's the end of our series on Super Metroid, so it's time to talk pillars, which for this game feels like something we've been talking about all along. I almost feel like this will be a shorter segment than normally we do, just because this is a thing that we've been doing along with this game. Yeah,
I think the structure of the game sort of required us to talk about that stuff as we went, because it's so closely tied, the exploration mechanics and kind of the rollout, as we talked about in the first episode. There's Metroid as a game structure is its own genre. It created a structure for games to basically copy from then on, and it's one of my favorite structures because of that sense of exploration. But exploration is key and as core, as a core pillar, and integrating those mechanics, the mechanical sort of progression based on acquisition rather than just leveling up or something like that, that's more abstract. It's like, no, I actually explored a space, did a thing, got a thing, and now my world has changed context. That whole mess of pillars in that, is kind of the crux of the whole thing, which is amazing.
To contrast with, like I said, more spatial domination type games like Assassin's Creed or Shadows of Mordor, those are games where you basically have all the abilities right at the beginning or near the beginning, and you just have lots and lots of stuff to do and find, and you get better. There is player skill. They are sort of player skill games if you want to get all the collectibles or do all the whatevers, all the side quests. But you don't really learn anything new after the first couple of hours of those sorts of games. Whereas these games not only ask you to learn things new throughout, to very late in the game. We were certainly in Maridia and the wrecked ship. I guess the Maridia was after. Getting new abilities, and then. Not only that, it asks you to reinterpret everything you've seen in the game so far through that new lens you've been given.
Yeah.
And that is the critical that is the critical thing about a Metroidvania game. I hope at some point we'll come back to a Castlevania game. Those are games I don't know as well. I have played one or two, but I've never played the new plus ultra of Symphony of the Night or whatever. So I would really love to come back to a Castlevania game, but Super Metroid is pretty hard to beat in terms of structure. I mean, there are problems that come from its era, mostly having to do with map presentation and the difficulty feed-forward loops that we talked about, which I don't think ever really leave the series. But even with that quibble, this structure is so critical to these games. I mean,
well, that moment it boils everything down for me, at least, and the reason that I think I gravitate toward these sorts of structures in games, that when I play games and love them, is that critical moment when you do acquire a new mechanic in whatever way you've acquired it, and you then, like you said, have to reevaluate, and basically just you have a new filter that you didn't know about often.
Yep.
Unless apparently you read the manual of this game, that you didn't know about. There, you're like, wait a second. If I do this now that I have this chained with this, that sense of discovery is just unbeatable in my mind. I mean, it's one of the, like, we say that there's games that rip, the Metroid structure off, and there are the literal ones that are, whether they're 2D or 3D, that, you can basically call directly back to, okay, that's clearly a Metroid structure. But that sort of moment of discovery as a pillar is seen throughout all sorts of genres, shooters, first-person shooters, RPGs. Like, that is something that, and I guess to some degree, there's, if we're super reductive about it, maybe Metroid doesn't completely own that, but that sense of discovery with combining that filter of changing the world that you've been exploring and basically making that mechanic a new filter. It's just so brilliant.
I think that, just staying within Nintendo, and we kind of talked in the very first episode about this sort of troika of IPs or sort of play styles in Mario and Zelda and Metroid. You see glimpses of what is brilliant about Metroid in Zelda or in Mario. I mean, in Zelda, it's more, I've got this equipment and I can go back. Oh, and now I can bomb that wall and get a little secret. But it's never really critical. I mean, certainly some of the abilities are critical to progressing, but it's, in terms of revisiting the whole world, completely unnecessary, almost entirely. Whereas in Mario, it's more, I've learned this new type of jumping or whatever, and the next time you play the game, you might apply that skill earlier, but it's more like, I'm going to play this whole game again from the beginning in Mario. I died. Mario is like a quarters aesthetic. Like, I put my quarter on the machine, I'm going to play next after I die, and I'm going to come back, and now that I know that I can time my jumps in certain ways, that I can actually get this mega jump or, whatever it is, skill based with Mario, and I'm not great on those. There's like the spin jump and whatever. But it's really just, I'm going to apply that next time I play because they're available from the beginning of the game if you know about them. Yeah. This is more, I'm given a thing that I couldn't do before, and like I said in a previous episode, I've been given the seed of, like, how do I do that? How do I get through that thing? Like, how am I going to do that thing? I mentioned in the pre-show, that we, if you go and look at what we used to call the attract mode, which is just the videos they play if you haven't put a quarter into a game, or if it's on demo mode in a GameSpot or whatever, GameStop. That's the website. Yeah. Anyway,
somebody does that at least once a day, every day. So,
you have you have these things where it actually shows you how to use 5 missiles to open a red door, or how to swing across those sort of plus blocks that are the, that particular beam, the grapple beam. So it sort of teases you with, you're going to want to know how to do these things. and you want to find the thing that's going to let you do those things. And that's great. I mean, it's just like you go and you bang your head against the thing. It's sort of like, it's sort of like doing like a puzzle game, like The Witness, or something like that, where it's like The Witness is different because at any point you could really solve any of the puzzles if you just understood the rules, but it's sort of like you get to a point where you're like, I don't understand what I'm seeing. I can't do it. I'll just go do something else for a while.
Yeah.
And in Super Metroid, you'll find the thing that unlocks the door for you in a literal way, usually. Terribly
difficult games to design as well, and I think that's probably why there's so few of them that are this good, of course. And to your point about like playing in Assassins or something like that gives you a lion's share of everything that you're going to need from a core mechanical perspective from the beginning. That sense of, with a lot of modern games, they'll give you all of those tools, but maybe you can upgrade them through a progression system or something where they
there's RPG elements.
There's an analog nature to their upgrades and such, but as far as like a new fundamental mechanic, it's very bold and, in my opinion, very difficult to introduce new fundamental mechanics into your systems design. You're just making your job that much harder, but the fulfillment that the player is going to get from that, I think, is just hard to beat. And there's this sort of, like you said, there's puzzle. I think we talked about this in the first episode. There's this mixture of mechanics and puzzle element with exploration, and this sort of weird mixture of those things that are kind of unexpected to mix those things together. You throw skill in there as well, which I think we definitely debated throughout the episodes that we were of two minds of how excited we are about that. Right. And as a small point, I brought up in the pre-show and after actually the post-show last episode that I forgot to mention last episode, this concept of gating and being very clear about digital gates about, okay, this is a door that needs a certain thing that I don't have. Okay, I found that thing. Now I can get through those doors. But they have this other layer that I'm always very mixed about of analog gates. That the doors being a digital gate, I either have the super bombs or I don't. But the analog gates being things like the super jump or I'm thinking of the power jump thing that you do, or the wall jump, or even the space jump once you get it. Like those things are gates in and of themselves, sometimes hard gates that you have to actually accomplish to proceed. But then they add in this layer of analog to them, that this skill that you can be better or worse at in kind of analog nature. And those can be frustrating because you don't. There's not a complete positive feedback loop to you on whether you are on the right track or not.
Exactly. I think that goes back to the very first encounter of the game when you first see Ridley. One of the things you talked about, was like, here's a boss that you don't know if you can beat.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's exactly the same problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's there's no feedback to the player. It's only through repeated play in that case, and really in any case, that I just can't do that, or I just can't get there. You might bang your head. I've heard this about Ori and the Blind Forest. I listened to the Idle Thumbs podcast, and Chris Ramo had trouble with areas where he thought he couldn't figure out that he just didn't have the ability to get to a place.
Yeah.
Right, and it just wasn't clear. And most of the time, this game is very good at signaling you can or can't.
It's masterclass usually.
Exactly. Yeah. Most of the time it's like, oh, it's really good. Setting the map aside, but it's really good about being very clear of you can or can't do this thing. Or you've just gotten the skill. Now I'm going to give you some monsters to train against it. For example, the space jump or whatever. Or literally like, hey, I've thrown you down a deep dark pit. Learn to wall jump. Or learn to whatever that jump is, the power jump.
Yeah. Well, as a quick side note, the funny thing that they did with that too is they introduced these sort of NPC creatures to teach you that stuff, and kind of in a way taunt you, because
it's also positive that you can't interact with them in any other way, in any verb that you have.
You're only there to watch them. Basically,
bomb them. Yeah, they're there to say, "Hey, look, you can jump." Hey, look, you can jump side to side, or hey, look, you can do this.
Yeah.
Hey,
and
listen,
it's taunt you over and over again, But then we didn't mention it, but as a little side note at the end, neither of us did it because it's just too ridiculous. But you can actually, I guess, save those creatures from them before the planet is destroyed. Yeah, this is a nice little tidbit, optional content thing there. But yeah, which is
a thing I like.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that sort of thing in games generally. I mean, that's something that. Warren Spector, is like, well, you know what? If you have content that some people won't see, that's okay. So they don't feel bad that you didn't see that, And if they don't know they didn't see it, what difference does it make, right? I mean, that's what I feel like. Back at this time, you wouldn't know that you missed that. But if you were the person who found that, of your circle of friends, it would have been amazing. You'd be the coolest.
Yeah, that value is worth much more than not putting in it at all. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard for us to kind of come away and say these are the pillars that we would take away from this game, because these are the sorts of games where we're like, man, this game is just so good. It is so bedrock, that it's hard to say. Like, it's
one of the
hugely influential. There's more things that we would fix in the few cases that it really kind of perturbed us.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and I almost feel weird saying that, it's hard to analyze a game like this that is so like bedrock, as you said, and have criticism, because it doesn't, it's sort of like, who am I to judge kind of a masterpiece, You
are a person with time.
I know. It's fair. I know it's irrational to think that way, but I think because it's my livelihood and my discipline that you know what I mean.
But the thing is, I mean, you look, this is one of the things where games are very different. You sit down, you look at, you've got an 800-page book, and you're like, wow, that's going to take me a while. Or you look at a, 4-hour movie or something like that, and you're like, oh, okay, that's going to take 4 hours. Even an 800-page book, I mean, if it's Stephen King, it'll probably go twice as fast as, like, Lana Ferrante or whatever. I mean, it's just density of thought and whatever. So there is some analog, but
you'll get through it
with other media. But you're going to get through it, and roughly how long it's going to take you to get through it. And the amount of time I spent just learning to wall jump, and then finally throwing up my hands and saying it's impossible with this controller, unpredictable.
Yeah.
Just even if I had bought this in 1990, whatever. I might have already worn down my control. I mean, like, that's literally the kind of levels of problems you might have encountered with this game.
Yeah.
And that's tough. So, anyway.
I'm
not down on that, but it is a thing that's unique to games where it can be very difficult to predict what's gonna stump you, what's gonna hold you up, where you're gonna be staggering around, wishing you knew what to do next.
Yeah, and we talk about it a lot, and I'm just saying I'm not guilty of any of these same mistakes, and have made worse ones probably myself. But we say it as much as we possibly can day to day in our daily life of making games. Respect the player's time, and it's a really easy thing to say, really hard to do, But I think it's something that that's a reminder for me. The other reminder and takeaway from the pillars category for me is just a good reminder that progression is a hot topic, has been for quite a few years now, and it's pretty much everywhere at this point, and people think about it in some way, shape, or form in most game designs these days. But this game was a great callback for me that progression comes in many forms, and it doesn't have to just be numbers. It can be a physical, acquisition of a mechanic that changes the world, and the exploration of the world for you. And it was a good reminder and refreshing for me to kind of just remember that. Obviously I knew it, but even in one of my favorite modern Metroid games, like Arkham Asylum, They have good Metroidvania elements in there, but they also have the progression in there of the points and the, seeing a bar raise up and fill up. And so it's just, you don't need to do all that stuff. The numbers are valuable, and we know there's compulsion loops and all that stuff that psychologically, we know why those things work. But there's something just about the good old fashioned tried and true, get a thing and now you can do it,
Right. Yeah, it's a good background also for difficulty management. If I'm playing, and I keep falling on Assassin's Creed because I've been playing it, but, you can go and upgrade your ships in Assassin's Creed 3 and I assume in Assassin's Creed 4. You can go and, make it so that you have, different types of cannon shot and reinforced walls or whatever like that. And they're basically an ability for the player who isn't skilled at those particular types of play to reinforce themselves. I'm like, okay, I'm going to invest the time. I mean, really, to a degree, MMOs are this, right? I mean, it's like, I'm going to level up to a certain degree so that I can and they actually tell you, the green things are easier and the yellow things are, around your area, and red are hard. And skulls are impossible. They can literally say, numerically speaking, you can't beat this thing. So, I mean, there's this distinction and there's feedback for those things. It's kind of separate from what I'm talking about. But it's more I'm going to reinforce my abilities, and I think that's okay for a lot of players. This is a game that says there's one bar to reach.
Yeah.
And that's fine. We both finished the game. We both,
Barely.
Yeah. Exactly. Getting through, for me, actually, Mother Brain wasn't necessarily the most difficult part. It was actually getting out after Mother Brain, which is funny because I found it a lot easier at the beginning of the game. I didn't fail that, and you did. And here at the end, I was like, oh my God, I gotta, space jump my way out of this thing, and there's lots of space pirates, and oh my God. And then I finally got to an area where I was comfortable, but it's like, oh, and you have 11 seconds left. I'm like, great, I'll be doing this again. There are ways to improve yourself, but they're, like I said, they're so feed forward. It's so hey, positive feedback loop. If you're good at these things, you can find these things that'll make you even better at these other things,
Yeah.
It's not open to all in that way. It's open to the curious. So, I don't know. I'm pretty OCD, and I spent a lot of time walking back over these levels. I literally made a map of several of the areas, literally, on graph paper, to go and, okay, I've been to this room. I, made little check marks. I've been in here. Okay, good. And occasionally I'd get to a thing and be like, yeah, I literally can't execute the thing that I need to do this thing. There was a particular thing. I finally figured out how to do it. Couldn't execute it to save my life. And it was, I think it was a missile power-up. I want to say it was a missile power-up that I could see, and it was in Maridia. And I could see it in, massive stuff, and I was like, oh, I need to do that super power thing, power jump. And I need to do it from a different room, which was tricky. And I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I just literally couldn't do it. My hands are too old and clawed, and I just literally could not do that thing. It was fine. I was like, okay, whatever. I'll try to find some others.
Yeah. And I think that the being careful of the analog gates is another takeaway for me too, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, amazing game, and stands the test of time still, and I'll probably play it again someday, for sure. It's
amazing. Yeah. Someday we'll be playing. We'll be 60 years old, and we'll be like, let's play Super Metroid again. Because, in fact, let's just, we'll have kids who can play the game at that point. We'll just here, you play the difficult parts.
Yeah, right.
I'll watch. I'll analyze. Like a true lead. I'll just watch from the side. Okay.
All right.
So in the end, great game. Play it. Let's move on.
Play it and learn from it. A lot to learn from.
All right. Before we talk about our next game, as I like to do when people give us a new review on iTunes, I like to read those things. I like to say what people are saying about us, especially if they give us those 5-star reviews, which are so great. We had one from Ridrum, I believe 2112. He interacts a lot with the Dev Game Club Twitter account online and with me, Brett_Duville. I wanted to call him out because he gave us a review, and thank you. His name is Ryan, I believe. He says, 2 experienced developers offer unique insights as they play through what have so far been classic video games. They share their own experience as players, as well as explain gameplay mechanics and design from an expert's perspective. The conversations are always fun and interesting as they share stories drawn from their background. Anyone who likes old-school games, gaming, or is interested in opinions from a developer's perspective would enjoy this podcast. So,
nice.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I like that one a lot. I think that's really what we're aiming for. You know, we're trying to give our own perspectives, but also kind of give a class of like, hey, if you were to go to school and pick a dozen or, you know, month to month a game to play to kind of, you know, learn stuff from, you know, those are the games we're trying to pick.
Yeah.
And so to that, what are we picking next?
We are going to go back to the RPG genre, but our first one was an Eastern RPG, Japanese RPG, and so we're going to hit the Western side now. In timing-wise, the first sort of renaissance of kind of the I don't know, the middle tier era of computer RPGs in Fallout
after
1.
adventure games were dying.
Yep. Adventure games
As adventure games are dying, we needed something to come back to take their place.
Well, and I think RPGs, Western RPGs, were in kind of an odd spot where, you know, you had the Ultimas that were evergreen and stuff, but like the Mind Magics and the Wizardries and some of them kind of started falling off a little bit, and, you know, the gold box games were kind of done. And I think the era of Fallout 1, which is what we're going to play next, and then Baldur's Gate and like the Infinity Engine games, Black Isle, Interplay, like they really had a big spike there where Interplay became king, you know, for a while for Western RPGs because they had the string of Fallout and then Fallout 2, and they had Baldur's Gate 2, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment, which we'll eventually play as well. And so we chose Fallout, obviously timely because of Fallout 4's success and you know, doing really well from a, you know, Bethesda's perspective.
Yeah, and it's done. Like all the, I believe they've shipped all the DLC. That game is complete and in the box and Game of the Year edition and blah blah blah. Those are games, Fallout 3 and 4 that I worked on. So Fallout's one of those series that is close to my heart. I think it's a game that I played right around the time I joined LucasArts. I mean, you and I may have been playing Fallout 2 at the same time.
Yeah, maybe so.
Around that time. And then, my memory is I bought Fallout 1 and 2 and maybe player guides or something like Prima guides from somebody in QA. Poor QA, perennially looking to dump their games for cash, around the time that we started working together. So it's a game that, you know, is like, oh man, this is great. I was waiting for Baldur's Gate to come out with its 100+ hours of gameplay. Fallout 2 is enormous. Fallout is a little bit more constrained.
It's more manageable, yeah.
We don't want to, as much as I want to play some of the other RPGs from this era, man, the thought of playing a 100+ hour game after playing Final Fantasy IX is kind of staggering. Yeah, I
think Fallout 1 is a good. Yeah, for the podcast. It's a good one to choose just because it is a little bit more focused. And there'll be definitely some good criticisms to talk about. It's also, for those who don't know, it's turn-based combat, so it's going to be a little different than some of the other Infinity Engine games and stuff, and it's different from, you know, Fallout 3 and 4, of course, in many ways, but the core aesthetic there...
It's also different from JRPGs.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a mix in the sense that, like...
Well, it's very tactical.
JRPGs have no spatial mechanics, no spatial combat management.
Yeah, right.
That's probably the biggest difference, right? I mean, they are turn-based, timed turn-based to a degree with Final Fantasy IX, but they're basically... Final Fantasy IX, it's like, oh, it's my turn. Oh, it's your turn. It's my turn. Oh, it's your turn. And Fallout is very much like, not only is it my turn, but I need to get to a certain point and then be able to like calculate percentage-wise what are my odds to be able to hit something with this weapon, et cetera, et cetera.
There's range, line of sight, and also sorts of new elements. Yeah,
a lot of carryover from sort of miniature style play in role-playing games.
Yeah.
Yep, tabletop stuff. I love. I'm not a huge fan of the degree to which that kind of dominates in like I don't know. D&D 3 and forward, but I do like playing miniatures on a grid just to sort of like, this is what you can see or what you'd be realistically able to do. And Fallout, I think, does a really good job of that, of sort of saying, it's realistic that you could do this. It might be difficult, but it's possible. And, it is sort of sensible that way. So... Tim and I are going to try to build different sorts of characters. And where are we going to play to again?
We are going to play through the beginning to the end of Vault 15, I believe, right before, basically get to Junktown and then stop playing. Don't do anything in Junktown if you're going to play along with us.
Right. This is a game, I feel like Fallout is... I mean, I wouldn't say linear, but it's more linear than Fallout 2.
Yeah.
And there is less story divergence. I feel like there is a lot of sort of character impact, like the choices that you make on the character creation screen are going to be important. Tim's going to pick a certain set of things, and I'm going to try to pick things that are different so that we have that to kind of bounce off one another. And I'll probably hate him as a result, but that's nothing new. But for you, go out and find a guide and find a good build because this is an older game, and as a guy who played a bard in the Baldur's Gate games, I can tell you it's possible to have a character that is just not good to finish.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yep. It was good times. But yeah, that's what we're gonna do next. In the meantime, you can find me at Brett_Duville on Twitter and him at
Tim Longo Jr.
Also on Twitter. And you can email the podcast at devgameclub@gmail.com. We, of course, also have a Twitter at devgameclub. We love getting reviews on iTunes. That's why we read them when we get them. We don't have so many. We love that 5-star. As far as I'm concerned, 5 stars, it's all there is. It's 5 stars.
Well, we have to earn it.
There aren't more. There aren't fewer. There's just the 5 stars. That's really where it's at.
Yeah,
but yeah, if you have a few words to send our way, we'll gladly read them and encourage questions, suggestions, etc. Through any of these methods.
That last review was great. It was good to hear. Just we hope people, find interest in what we're talking about. We feel like the dev perspective on things is something that, maybe isn't out there that much. And I'm glad to hear that people kind of, are digging that. So, yeah. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. With any creative, endeavor in a particular medium, you're building on the giants that came before you. And for us, we're looking back at, what we perceive as giants, but also, things that we played that impacted us. And certainly, Metroid is a series that impacted us. And, Hitman 2 is something that impacted Tim. And certainly Final Fantasy 9 is something that impacted me. And that's why we're picking these things. And, Fallout, I'm glad to return to it, because not only have I worked on the series, but, that is a game that, impacted both of us quite a lot, I would say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For me, for sure.
It makes us both feel so special.
Nice. Very good. Good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, well, signing off then. I will have to go and find an appropriately steampunky name for myself. But for now, I remain Brett Duville, and he's...
Tim Longo.
All right, thank you, and good night.
Good night.